So we're going to be talking about social networks today. Let's start beginning by asking what exactly are social networks. So social networks are actually websites. On all of these social networks, you're able to access them by going to a computer and typing in the name of the website. So they are websites, but many of these don't really function very well on a website. They function much better as apps, things you can use from your phone or your mobile device. Social networks, because they're social, bring people together, and they are the ultimate virtual experience, with the exception of maybe one of them, Meetup. They rely on people coming together over an internet connection without actually, touching or being in the same room. Social networks use computers or devices to communicate. That's what makes them unique. So where you might have a social network that is not virtual, for instance, your church or your school, where people actually come in and mingle with online social networks, they use computers and devices. Okay, their evolution has gone from quite a track. It started with the bulletin board system. Some of you people that have been online for many, many years might remember that. So you would go and use your dial-up connection, and you would be connected to somebody's room somewhere, and you would exchange chats. It was probably very similar to what we use now as chatting, and that's how it began. No pictures, no movies, just text. So they were another thing that they did was they also exchanged files. And so with this bulletin board system, people can pass on one file to the next. And by files, it could be just regular files, or it could be things like movies and CDs and things like that. So many of them were pirated, and it was very unmonitored, so people got away with things. They also posted messages. Accessed over your telephone lines. I think you might remember that sound when you were accessing the internet through your telephone line. The bulletin board system, as we said, was very basic. It was more social than technology. It was just basically texting and things like that. It was mostly local because back in those days, we had to pay for long distance. Now that's changed quite a bit, but because of that, our bulletin boards were mostly local. Okay, now gradually things started to evolve as more services were added. So part of the evolution of the social network began with CompuServe, which was a 1970s business-oriented business communication solution. And it worked. It was a good 10 or 15 years. It was just really within the businesses until it started to come into the home environment as well. Shortly in the 90s, shortly after CompuServe, AOL joined, and AOL was could have been, if you've been involved in computers since the late 80s, early 90s, it's very possible that AOL was your first email provider. And it was kind of like your browser and your email and your internet server, internet provider, all in one. So we paid AOL for that. It accessed the internet for us. It allowed us to exchange messages via email. At the beginning, we paid for AOL by the hour. And so they have all sorts of things like the news on their site, which we thought was really cool, but we always had to sort of monitor how much time we spent. Eventually that went to the flat rate. And I think also, as I remember with AOL, you had to do a local number because it was still long distance. So they gave a list of local numbers and you had to find the one that was closest to you. AOL was the first to introduce buddies. And so that way you could tell if your buddy, your AOL friend, was online, and you could actually talk with them while you were online. And of course now that's nothing, but back in the day that was really something to be able to see, oh, this person's online and I have a question for them, and you could actually chat with them right there. That began in AOL. Now classmates.com is still around, but it certainly doesn't hold the power and intrigue that did when it first came out. When it first came out, classmates.com was the chance for people to reconnect with people you went to school with years and years ago. Was a really popular use of technology. And so when that was introduced, a lot of people joined. They joined with their school in their class year. And then whenever somebody from your class joined, you would get a notification. It was really a very interesting way to get people together. Unfortunately, it kind of turned a little bit rogue, and now there's a lot of ads and everything. And I think that I'm sure it doesn't have the feel that it used to have. In fact, I think Facebook has replaced classmates.com. But nevertheless, that was the beginning of that. LinkedIn was incredibly important for people that were looking for new jobs or to network with people in the same field as theirs. And so LinkedIn was a way to post your resume. And of course, in those days, we didn't know about digital safety. We would just put our whole resume out there. Now we wouldn't do that. But it was very useful for getting to know people in the business, joining groups in the business, discussion groups, for example, exchanging ideas, and maybe even getting some job leads. It's still going on. It doesn't have quite as good a reputation as it did. There's other products that are out there as well, but it still is the leading resource for people looking for jobs. Okay, and then Facebook was next. Facebook began in the colleges. I'm sure you've heard the story about Facebook. It was called Facebook because it was actually a combination of the pictures of co-eds and information about them in a way that's really disgusting to read about now, but that's how Facebook got its start. In 2006, it opened to everyone. And Facebook also was the first to introduce the concept of liking something, which has really made this Facebook much more interactive. So instead of having to comment on everything, you could just give somebody a like, and that was usually a little bit easier and nicer to do. Facebook then became the definition of social networks. Okay, AF, after Facebook. It wasn't the last one. Twitter, 2006. Now, Twitter is an interesting one because when that first came out, 140 characters you were limited to. And for the longest time, people were going, what are we going to do with this social network? It just didn't seem to make sense. People were posting what they're having for lunch and things like that. And it just wasn't that interesting. But then we sort of began to realize how important it could be, especially in emergency situations. So now, jump forward to now, if you have, say, an earthquake or a fire or something going on, you could find a reliable Twitter feed like the US government or your local community firefighter, and you could get accurate, up-to-date information about that without having to worry about going to the newspaper, even online, might not be as accurate, or going to your friends and saying, what do you think is going on? Wonderful use of Twitter. So Twitter is probably one of the most powerful social networks if used properly. Some of the feedback, we already had the like, but now with Twitter, you can use a handle, so that @ symbol and handles. So what that would mean is that if I'm tweeting something and I want to make sure somebody else sees it, somebody specific sees it, I would use that @ and then attach their handle. That's their Twitter name. Like I think mine is mburns91941. So I would do that if I wanted to be included, and then that person would receive that notice on their wall. Hashtags. Hashtags began with Twitter, and now they're used in other social networks as well. And hashtags allow you to identify something as a potentially popular topic. People using the same hashtags, if you search by that hashtag, you could see everybody posting about that. So it could become very useful as far as that's concerned. And then retweeting. So if you just like something, instead of just liking it, you can retweet it. So you're sending it out again and on your feed to your followers. It's something that somebody else did. So that's Twitter. And we'll look more at these guys in a bit. Google Plus I put up there because it's interesting. It's another example of a Google service that they had for a while and then they ditched. So Google Plus was supposed to be something like Facebook, but now it's no longer active, like many other things that Google has, but it was a good try, I guess. Pinterest. Pinterest is an interesting one. It's a series of boards that you set up. So for example, you are looking for ideas for gardening. So you'll be online and you'll see something and you'll see that little P symbol, that little P, as in the letter P. When you tap on that, it connects to your Pinterest account. And then whatever you're looking at it, you can assign that to one of your boards. So we'll look at the Pinterest in a second, but I have, for example, a gardening board. And so when I'm online and I see something interesting about gardening that might look good in my backyard, I'll click on the P, it'll connect me to my account. I'll say, put it on the gardening board, and they'll say, okay, and it'll show up. And it's a very pretty little app. I don't use it very much, but it's very pretty and it has a lot of potential. And then Instagram, some people prefer Instagram above all the others. The nice thing about Instagram is it allows people to share selected photos. Now on Facebook, some people upload their entire albums of everything they have to Facebook. But Instagram, it's more for taking one picture and adding some quality editing to it and then sharing it with people. So, and you can also hashtag with Instagram as well, which would then categorize things. So for example, you take a picture of your dog and you put it on Instagram and you hashtag cutest dog. And then you go and you search Instagram for cutest dog. And not only will you see your dog, you'll see everybody else that hashtag their dog is cutest dog. Then you guys can all get in a fight about who's the cutest dog. Okay, there are ways that social networking can benefit us. They're excellent for networking. We already talked about the LinkedIn, but also communities. When we talk about Nextdoor in a little bit, it's a good way for us to feel closer to our neighbors in these days where we don't really see them very much. At least we know they're there when we have certain social networks that help us to communicate with them. Businesses use social networks. Brand loyalty. So if there's a product you really like, you might actually follow them on Facebook, receive all the latest news about them, maybe get some deals that you can use when you go to purchase something from them. They would also then, if you like them on Facebook, you would start seeing advertising on your device because of the fact that you like them on Facebook. That's called targeted advertising. So, in a way, it feels like a little creepy, like they're spying on you, but in a way, if you're looking for something and all of a sudden you start seeing ads for it, that might not be too bad because you can start shopping for, what kind you really want. That's business. Health. We're going to talk about some of the ways that some of the different health networks that they have, but they have ones for patients and they have ones for families and friends. So for patients, you've been diagnosed with some type of illness that you don't know very much about and you'd like to meet others that have it so you could talk to them about it. They have a social network for you called Patients Like Us. Or if you're family and friends with someone who has a life-threatening illness and they are, they need you're constantly wanting to update their progress. And I know when my mother was sick, my sister was trying to send emails every week talking about how she was progressing. Well, there's a site, I think I have it on the site. I'm forgetting the name right now, but it's on your handout. And that one is caringbridge.org. And that one is one that you could focus on a person and you can do updates for them. And every time there's a new update, everyone gets an email about the update. So it kind of takes the load off your shoulders of keeping people updated on your loved one. And then of course, online health information. You always have to be wary on what your social network you're using to get this online health information. But if you're using a good one, it's a very valuable source. Civic participation and engagement. A lot of these things that are happening now are happening because of social networks. So, for example, when they had the different events after 2016, after the presidential election, those were all instigated within a period of a week. So people within a week were gathering by the millions, I guess, protesting or engaging or making themselves heard. Now with the COVID, there's people that are all gathering at certain places, and the way that they get the word out is they go on social networks and they say, hey, we're going to have a demonstration at town hall. Are you with us? And that's how they get the message out. So it really spreads the word quickly. Okay, disaster response. I think I told you about this, how important this is when there's a disaster and people have to get help quickly. There's people that would belong to a certain type of social network that would receive a notice whenever something is happening, and they would be able to respond quickly with that. People can tweet on things as they're happening, so you get up-to-date information, even if it's not always the most accurate. Person finders for disaster relief response. Those are all different ways that can help them. Social networking highlights things that we don't like to think about too much, like human rights and climate change. So social networking allows people to get their word out in an open environment and let people see that information. Sometimes they're faced with conflicts when they do that, but nevertheless, that is one way that they use social networks. And then, of course, just to build social connections. That's why they're there. Okay, what do you need to join a social network? Well, most cases, you don't need money. They're mostly free. You need a username, and that username would be unique to that social network. Doesn't mean you can't use the same username on other social networks. It would just be like, for Twitter, it would be that username at Twitter, or Facebook, that username at Facebook. Sometimes usernames are email addresses, so it depends on the social network. You should have a strong password, especially for ones that have personal information on it. So keep that in mind. You don't want people going into a social network as you and posting things as you. That could get people into trouble. Sometimes you will have to provide to the social network different types of personal information, like your address or access to your camera and phone or your contacts. These all sound really bad, and you say there's no way I would do it, but if you want to join Nextdoor, which is the community based on where you live, you have to provide your address. If you want to use Instagram and post pictures, you have to provide Instagram with access to your camera and your phone. And many of these require that if you want to use them, that you put in your contact list. Now that can sometimes be avoided, but giving them your contacts, access to your contacts, would allow you to see which one of those contacts are members of that social network. But of these three things, I think that's one I would be least excited to give out. But the others, depending on the app, you might have to use it. You might have to give that information out. Okay, they do collect information from us, the social networks. So they'll collect your age and gender, and that's because they're going to be sending you advertisements. I told you the social networks are free. They are, but they do have advertisements, and you can't opt out of them. So they will collect your age and gender. If you lie about your age and gender, that's fine. You'll just receive advertising for whatever age and gender you said you were. We'll also collect your occupation and your work interests. If you give that out, for example, it will save that. So then it will link you with more people that have that same occupation or work interest. So it tries to bring people together with that data. Things you've purchased, of course, it'll keep track of that. Things you've reviewed online through things like Yelp. So when you review things online, that data is kept. And then that data is used to tell the person who is providing the service how you responded. And I think probably all of us have left a bad response somewhere and then received a note back from the seller saying, hey, sorry about that. Can I do something to make it right? So they do collect that. It isn't anonymous necessarily. Your location. And again, that might be important for some of these because where you live is important for what could be offered to you. So for example, Meetup, as an example of a social network, needs to know where you live so they can tell you what's going on in San Diego, and you don't get everything for Indianapolis because you probably wouldn't want to go to Indianapolis to meet people for lunch. So they also collect what you've liked, shared, and posted. And what is really kind of scary about that is they take this and all these other things and they create profiles of you. Now, it's not like they're following you as an individual around and creating that profile, but they are creating this profile that when there's an ad or when there's something interesting out there, you know, a political campaign or something, they know what to send you. So if you seem to be maybe on the liberal side, you will probably receive more ads for liberal candidates than conservative. And the same would be true if you tend to be conservative. So all these things are saved. And you never went out and said I'm liberal, but you like all those liberal posts. You might share them. You might post posts of your own that have to do with that slant, and then they would know what, you know, what type of person you are. They also keep track of who responds to your posts and likes. So think about that when you respond to other people's posts and likes, because it's not like you're just responding to them. You're responding to them, all the other people that have responded, and the entire social network. So you would have an affiliation with that person you have liked something with. And you may end up getting some of the same information, some of the same ads, some of the same suggestions that they have. And they also say what these people have in common with you. Because again, that's creating your profile. So are you political? Are you athletic? Are you social? These are the kind of things that they want to know, and that's going to help them build that picture of you. All right, you do have to practice safety when you're on that social network. You can do that by being careful with those links that are in posts. Now, you go to Twitter, everything is a link. So in a way, it's hard to avoid the links. But now they've gotten to the point where oftentimes the links will be accompanied with a picture, which will sort of validate that it's coming from a real source. Whereas if you had a link that just said something like, you know, tinyurl.com/something, that may not be a legitimate link, but one that takes you to YouTube and you see the YouTube picture there, that is a legitimate link. That's from a legitimate source. So having the picture, having a little bit of description is better than just a link. Remember, your post is permanent. You can't remove your post. Yeah, you can remove it from your home page, but that doesn't mean if someone saved it to their site, it's not going to be there. It will be there. Now, keep in mind also, when you post something, it goes to everyone that follows you in that social network. So they'll all see it on their board. But if it makes you feel any better, it doesn't go on their home page. So once you've posted, if you post it and then 6 months later you go, oh my gosh, that was terrible, I shouldn't have posted it, and you delete it from your site, it isn't that your friends are going to be able to find it unless they're able to scroll all the way back to where that date was. So it's not quite as bad as it seems as far as your friends seeing it, but what you post is permanent, and especially if you're posting in response to somebody else, you have no control over that. So keep that in mind. Don't trust who it's from. Often, there are a lot of fake accounts out there, a lot of them. I think it's something like 30 or 40% of the accounts on Facebook are fake. Don't quote me on that number, but it's a high number. And so even if it says it's from your best friend from high school, you don't really know unless you actually say, oh, you remember that time we did this? And they go, yeah, and you remember this? Well, now you know that they're real. But especially if you're already friends with someone and you get a link, this person wants to be your friend, it's possible that it's somebody pretending to be that person. So just be careful of that. Never send personal financial information to businesses using social media. So in other words, you go to, maybe your bank has a site, or maybe your broker has a site or something. Don't put your account number on there. Don't do anything, don't put anything in there that would identify any sensitive information through social media, because it's just too easy for someone to be able to get a hold of that. Um, this is probably one thing you don't even have to be told, but don't go onto Facebook and say, hi, I'm home alone. I forgot to lock the door and the dog is napping, so he probably wouldn't bark. But yeah, don't worry about it. I'm having a good time at home. Don't do that, okay? In that, I think we all know that. Okay, there's all sorts of privacy things that you could do on all of these sites to make them more private. And these things change all the time. So if there's a social network that you use a lot, take some time to learn about their privacy policies. Take some time to make the changes that you have to do to make sure that you are safer. But then keep in mind, judging from what we've just talked about, that you're never totally secure on that social network. Whatever you post can come back to you at some point. Okay, oh, then also the virus protection. These are just common things you need to make sure you do. Keep your operating system up to date and your browsers up to date. All those things are important.